All right, how you doing?
Good.
Okay. You just sit right here. How you been doing?
Good. Just trying to keep up and catch up.
Yeah. That's important. So I wanted to meet with you today to give you some observations and feedback in reference to the last observation
Mhm.
that was done. First of all, I want to say we set a goal last week. As you would know, our instructional practice, we are station instruction. So I've noticed that you all have been doing station instruction.
Mhm.
What have been some goals for station instructions that you and Ms. Ronetta have had in place?
For the stations, what we've been working on is with the stations is to kind of feed off of the what do I want to say, the lesson.
Okay.
Okay, so we will
Align with the objectives and the state
objectives.
performance
Yes.
indicators.
Yes. So we've been finding it's been really helpful because we'll do the lesson with them and they'll take notes and then we'll do the stations and that kind of puts that into perspective of them learning even more about it and understanding it. So especially our special ed kids because they're more hands-on, they're more visual than just sitting there writing notes. So
And
that's
what would you pinpoint as specifically making the station instruction successful for students?
I think it's more in the sense of visual and breaking it down more for them. Because I noticed that, like, example, we spent a little bit more time than we would like to on the Punnett squares. That was a challenge for them. So then when we did the stations, we kind of broke it down for them. I gave them a Punnett square, gave them an example, and then they started kind of working together as teams and putting it together so that they can understand it more.
So today I want to dive into specifically checking for understanding.
Mm-hmm.
So I've noted that you've done a good job of circulating around the classroom and making sure we're interacting with students, which I think is super successful.
Mm-hmm.
But I want to make sure we're very intentional in checking for understanding. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so, what are the keys would you describe as the importance of checking for understanding? Why do teachers check for understanding?
Well, basically, when they're understanding, from there, they can kind of develop even further on their on their learning. So we're looking for, are they understanding the concept of what we're teaching them, and then from there we can build on more onto the program for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like, example is when we're doing, especially when we're in stations and someone doesn't understand the basics of what's going on, it kind of breaks it down for them. Mm-hmm. And then from there, the next station kind of expands a little bit more on that. So, and we're doing a lot of vocabulary because I believe if they understand vocabulary, that's going to help them in the long run to understanding the other concepts.
And so in real time, how would you check for understanding to access whether Tim or Janet understands the exact meaning of the vocabulary that you all are teaching?
Basically what I've been doing with them is we've been doing vocabulary checks, like crossword puzzles, things like that. Also, I give them a word and then I have them put it in their words of what that word means. So, instead of them giving a vocabulary word from like the biology book or from what we give them, have them put it in their words. And then from there, I also have them put it into a drawing or in another concept of where they can understand it, where we can use it in like biology or somewhere else. So
are they creating manipulatives or graphic organizers to capture this?
Yeah, graphic organizers.
And that's working successfully.
Yeah.
Well. Okay. Perfect. So I want to show you a video of some of the best practices in checking for understanding. And so as you watch the video, pay close attention to what the teacher does and what the teacher says. What the teacher does and what the teacher says. So what did you notice the teachers saying and the teachers doing to check for understanding?
Well, they're interacting with the students. They're also going on one-on-one and observing. They're real observant. Also, one thing I liked is that they're paying attention to them. They're not just, and they're stopping if the student doesn't understand.
At the point of error.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that. And I've noticed, I call it the deer in the headlight look they get. I noticed that. That's a West Virginia. But they just, especially when I'm observing and walking around the room, I can tell. They just kind of get that blank look. And I also pay attention who's behind on their work or they're struggling, because they have a tendency not to want to ask. They don't want to be put on that focus of that. What I've noticed though, now that they've gotten to know me and I've gotten to know them, they'll start raising their hands and, Ms. Peterson, can you help me over here or something? So they're starting to trust me with, which is nice.
Do you think it's any challenges that you face when implementing check for understanding in the station instruction?
Yeah, sometimes I do. I run into the ones that I'm not sure if they're kind of following the other students there, and because I'll walk away and I'll go help another station and then come back and their activity sheet's done. Are they really did they understand it, or were they kind of helping each other? So that one, sometimes I question myself on, especially if I know the student and know what their work is and where they're at.
And ability and to your learning and all that. Right.
Yeah.
And so to that point, and that's why actually I'm glad that you share, because I want to share this document with you, which is 21 ways to check for understanding. And so if you flip over to page 1, it says you want to avoid yes or no questions, right?
Right.
And so I think of when our students, it's easy for us to say yes because Peter said yes. But I can't rationally describe what is my rationale for defending it, what artifacts support whether the answer is yes or no. So that's why we want to avoid those. But then think about asking students to reflect. And so this is when, particularly doing the do now and the exit ticket, having a written reflection so that you can see that level of cognitive learning, that students can cascade their learning to be able to exemplify to you whether they've mastered that concept or their learning indicator or whether they have not.
Okay.
Because they have to fully write that down. And I think that gets away from what you spoke about earlier. I leave you with a blank sheet of paper and I come back 5 minutes later and it's filled out. But I know that you were struggling with getting it filled out. So did you fill it out on your own, or did you specifically, have some support with that? And realizing that however you got there, we want to be able to support and be able to convey that you can master that particular learning objective.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Another thing, just real quick, is just hand signals. So usually I do a fist of 5, and so I break it down, and you have to teach it. So like, 1 is that I understand it. 2 is that I'm struggling with it. 3 is that I kind of understand it, but I want to work on my own.
Okay.
4 is that I understand it and I can teach somebody else. And 5 is that, hey, I got this, I can explain to another student and I'm ready to move on. And so there's just simply a fist of 5. And so what that gives you is, if Ron understands it and wants to struggle on his own, he's going to hold a 3. Whether if Lori does not understand it and needs some support, she's going to hold up that 2.
Okay.
And so it's meeting everybody where they are. That's what we call scaffolding learning. And so it's not like, and you have to create that positive learning environment that, hey, if Ron has a 2 and he needs some support, that's fine. And if Lori has a 5 and she's ready to move on and teach somebody else, that's fine, because we're meeting each learner where they are.
Okay.
And so that's just another way you can check for understanding.
I never thought about that. Yeah.
And that's just a quick thing that, you can just simply mark
It's
up.
called fist
of 5.
Okay.
And so each teachers do it different. So one in my class may be different from the one in your class, but you set those norms. And what I did is I put mine on a sticky note and laminated it, and it set on all the desks. So they knew that one, one finger is this, two fingers this, three finger. It's kind of like a map so that they can know.
No,
And for my learners who struggle, that was almost like an anchor chart just on the desk.
yeah,
And then I would also make two anchor charts and put one like on the north side and the south side of the classroom, just so you can point to that. You know, and you say, hey, you know, and it takes a couple of times to practice and build that anonymity within the classroom.
yeah.
But once you get it, it's nothing that they can cheat on, because it's like, hey, I want Miss Peterson to know I'm struggling with this, so I'm on a 2.
Right.
Or Miss Peterson, I got this, I'm ready to move on, and I can help somebody else, and that helps alleviate you, and you can go help Jonathan that needs that additional support, and you can have Sarah to pair with Ron, because you know Ron is one of our bubble students, and he just needs that, he needs to hear it from a colleague and able to get
Right.
it. Yep.
That's great.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. But I also what I do, and I think this has been helping with them, is I'll be observing, and Miss Watts will be teaching,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden I kind of look at them and I come like, they're not grasping this.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say, Miss Watts, I don't understand. Can you repeat that for me?
Yeah.
Because now they've gotten so comfortable, they realize, well, Miss Peterson doesn't understand. Maybe I don't
Mhm.
understand it. So they're starting to ask
Because they
questions.
take a chance.
Yeah, they'll take a
take a
chance
chance,
because
yeah.
they know that I'll, because I'm like, they're not getting this.
Good.
What? But I like this. I like this a lot.
And so, based on what we discussed today, what do you think your action steps should be in moving forward to specifically and intentionally check for understanding in the classroom instruction?
Well, one thing's, I like the YouTube, and I liked personally get on there and watch that video again.
Okay. And I can share that link with you.
Okay. And I'm gonna read through this. This will help kind of extend more on my observing and putting a lot of this stuff into practice a little bit more. Because even if I might be doing like maybe 5 of these or something, but now it gives me more options, and maybe that'll even work better.
So let's write these action steps down. You're going to rewatch the YouTube video
Mm-hmm.
on checking for understanding. You're going to read and apply the 21 ways to check for understanding, specifically the activities in which you can introduce checking for understanding in the classroom, where it's very intentional
Mm-hmm.
and not a forced checking for understanding. And then you want to follow up on the data that you collect regarding your checking for understanding. So if I notice that in my classroom, 60% of my students have not mastered the standard, that may lead to a reteach opportunity.
Yeah. Okay.
And then on the flip side of that is if 80% of your students have mastered that concept, that lets you know that you're ready to move on, and they will not lead to a reteach opportunity, but you want to be able to go back and reflect and say, what were some of the strategies and best practices that I implemented as a teacher that led us to get to that 80% mastery? And that can continue, you can pull from this toolkit that I provided you.
Mm-hmm.
You can pull from best practices in the classroom, but that's just one as a reflective practitioner you want to be cognitive of. And so checking for understanding is also goes along with pacing. So if I introduce something, I'm not going to introduce something I'm not going to talk for 20 minutes and then say, do you all get it, right? I'm going to introduce something for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to do a checking for understanding, particularly if it's a new concept, because I want to be able to assess where my kids are.
Right.
And so you can do the numbers. You can also do the flashcards, where this real quick, where you take red construction paper and green construction paper. Very simple. Red is I do not get it and I need help. Green is that I get it and I'm ready to move on. Just do a simple poll of the classroom, and they can flip that up and they can let you know. So if I got 10 students in the classroom and I got 7 students holding up red and I got 3 holding up green, am I ready to move on?
Right. Right. Yeah.
Would I be
That's
ready to
good.
move
No
on?
way.
Yeah. And so that's
Yeah,
just a quick
I like
thing.
that, yeah.
And then that takes away what you talked about earlier, looking around and saying, okay, well, what does Lori have on her paper compared to what does John have on hers? It's just being honest, and saying, hey, I don't understand this, and I think that we're making some leeway if you're saying that. I did that when I co-taught in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So the teacher would introduce something, and I would see, those eyes looking around,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't say anything because they feel like they're embarrassing, or it's not. But we had to create that, very nurturing and inclusive classroom. And I said, hey, Mr. Gann, I don't get that concept on proper adjectives. Can you re-explain that to me?
Mm-hmm.
And so he would re-explain it, right? And they would get it, but they needed to see it. Mr. Gann, could you give me a couple examples of a proper adjective just to make sure I'm aligned? And so the kids started asking those questions. And so what I did was I would start with sentence starters. And so I would just have those again. So once we mastered the Fist of Five, I took that off the desk, cleaned the desk down, and then I put sentence starters in that place. So it was always, the desk was a learning process for us, and it was a reference guide.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to put too many things on there because it can be a distraction.
Right.
But once we mastered one concept, or if I was introducing something, I would put that back on there. So sentence starters was our next, so that they could have that very intense, very intentional dialogue in the classroom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it just serves as an anchor chart, right?
Yeah.
Then have it all posted up around the classroom. So we had what proper adjectives was, but I also said a sentence starter. So with what we're dealing with, what is a proper adjective?
Mm-hmm.
How do I identify a proper adjective, right? And one of
Right.
the key things the kids said, a proper adjective is going to be capitalized. And it's going to name a specific type of noun.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're looking at Italian dressing, French dressing, Italian and French are my proper adjectives because they're describing the type of dressing I need to put on my salad.
Right.
And same thing. So like when we said Ford Mustang, when we said Chevrolet Cavalier, we know that proper nouns, not to be confused with proper adjectives, they're not naming a specific type of car because that's just the noun of it, right? But when I go back to, it was prom coming up, and that was a big thing. And so he had an Italian tux, or he had a Japanese tux. And they said, well, tux is the noun, but what kind of tux does he have? An Italian or a Japanese? And the girls like that with the dresses, right?
Yeah.
She had a very French dress.
Yeah.
And so, it was high interest because it was relative to what they were going to do because it was springtime and getting ready for prom.
Right.
But it also taught those literary techniques that we needed them to get.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great.
And so that's the other part, I think, making sure that whatever we do, that they're mastering it, and we know they're mastering. You're collecting the data, and then you're using that to inform your job as a teacher, whether I need to reteach or whether I'm ready to move on.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay.
That's great.
So would you read back to those action steps, what we're going to do?
Okay. So I'm going to rewatch the video
Mm-hmm.
and then I'm going to reapply. Sorry, I can't read my writing some days. So I'm going to review the 21 checklist here, and then apply the activities and check for understanding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to follow up by reteaching I'm sorry, I can't read my writing. So sorry. I should have probably got my laptop out on better moving that way. So I'm going to follow up by observing and then reteaching if not understanding.
Mm-hmm.
Also review if they do understand the percentage
Mm-hmm.
and what worked and what didn't work.
Gotcha. And so the next 4 minutes, we're going to spend scripting out how we use checking for understanding in there. So we're going to use the Fist of Five. And so realizing that we have to go back and teach the kids that, but if they already know that, how would we use the Fist of Five? So I want to give you 4 minutes to script out how you would introduce that in a lesson and how often you would refer back to the checking for understanding. So how many times would you say, okay, as a result of me introducing the new vocabulary or introducing unit 1 of chapter 2, if we're looking at the cell conversion of mitosis, who can explain the cell conversion of mitosis? And then using that Fist of Five to gauge the room and see who can do it. Being able to call on somebody to check for understanding whether they can do it or cannot do it. And then linking them up with somebody that, so this is where our tiered learning has to go into place and our intentional practice. So we know our students who are tier 3 and who needs those intense supports, but we should also know our tier 1 and our tier 2. So tier 2s are students on the bubble line. They may get it or they may not get it. Tier 1s are those students who definitely get it and they're ready to can support other people. And so I want us to script out some time so that you can see what that practice looks like in a classroom, and you will have the beginning makings of a lesson plan for you to implement within your own class.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you 4 minutes. I'm gonna set the timer, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna compare notes, and I'm gonna see what you have scripted in your lesson plan.
Okay.
You can see what I have.
So
scripted.
just pick. Okay. So you want me to use the FISTA 5 that you use
as the checking for understanding technique.
Okay.
And then so we can look at whatever you're teaching this week, or if you plan on teaching something next week, we can look at what we're introducing. So it could be a vocabulary section, a unit on vocabulary, or it could be the next unit that's coming up in your chapter.
Okay.
And we just want to see where you're going to inscript in that lesson plan, checking for understanding.
Okay. All right.
So I'm gonna set the timer for 4 minutes, and then we'll revisit each other.
Mine went blank.
Okay. Let's see what you have.
Okay, so what I did is I just took a lesson that I've been working on. So I've been just working on something.
What's the
But
lesson?
it's we're practicing evolution,
Okay.
understanding of evolution. So I have I'm presenting the students with the fitness who's going to survive. So what I did is I did a card game. I'm starting to work on a card game for them. Each student is given a card with a frog on it, and that frog is then given certain criteria like big eyes, black, brown, white. So there's different things with the frog, and then I present an environmental change in to them. Then what we do is I ask them to get with another frog that they believe would help them out with this change. And then with that environmental change, I give them another challenge with it, and how many of them would survive if I gave them this challenge. And if they couldn't survive, they had to sit. So then from there, until I have like a few frogs left, to understand why that happened. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Makes sense.
And then what I do is for the understanding, if they didn't understand, I start asking questions like, why did that change affected your frog?
And so what would be a response from students other than yes or no that will convey to you that they could master the concept of that specific change?
Mm-hmm. One thing, like questioning, basically with the change, why did your frog, Susie, why did your frog survive?
Mm-hmm.
And why do you believe the other ones didn't? So asking that question that is going to tell me if they understood or not, why they're still standing.
By Susan being able to compare and contrast why her frog will be more fit than Savannah's frog, who may not be as fit.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So that for them to understand that. Also, why did you find another frog? What was why did you go over to Tommy's frog and think that you were going to survive with him? Well, because I'm brown and he's brown, and you said the light is, now it's snowing out, so so to compare that to that, yeah.
How often would you check for understanding during the lesson?
I would probably do it with every change that I make.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. Ask them why. Why did your frog die?
And how would they be able to convey it to you? Would it be verbal? Would it be written?
I would do written and verbal.
Okay, a combination?
Yeah.
Why?
Because I think the written, for one thing, the verbal would be that everyone could hear.
Mm-hmm.
Written is for them, so that they can study or go back on their notes, or if they have any additional questions, we can go over it too. And I'm to be honest with you, I write everything down myself. So some of these students are the same way. They can understand and memorize more when they're writing down.
What would be the best time for me to come and observe you leading classroom instruction, specifically what you're implementing, a very strategic, a very focused checking for understanding?
Mm-hmm. When is the best time? Like, okay, when's the next time I'm going to be teaching, or when?
What time? So we've had this conversation now, and I just want you as a reflective practitioner.
Okay.
What would be a good day for me to come in and see you in action implementing what we talked about, the action plan that we talked about?
Yeah, I'll be working on this. Right away. So, I'll probably be implementing some of this into my next lesson plan next week. So, yeah. So I'll get with Miss Watts and and kind of review some of this stuff, because I think she needs to know too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I will make it a point on Monday
Okay.
to come in.
Monday.
Mhm.
Okay.
And it gives, and so I would look at that in the lesson plan, and so I want, when you submit your lesson plan, so to be very intentional with where the checking for understanding is gonna be implemented,
Mm-hmm.
and then I can see that in action,
Okay.
and definitely provide some feedback and see what pushes and, what definitely glows you have as we implement this, so we can impact and improve student achievement.
Okay.
Any questions for me?
No, I don't think so. Oh, I do have a question for you, kind of off the subject here.